Good evening. My name is Sheila Riggs. I'm Vice Chairman of the Baltimore Council on Foreign Affairs. I'm not surprised to see such a big crowd tonight, but it's always wonderful to have a big crowd at council meetings. Before I introduce our speaker, I'd like to take a moment to express the Council's deep appreciation to the World Trade Center Institute, which is joining with the Council tonight in sponsoring this program. You still can't hear me? Okay. Is there any expert on microphones here?
Just talk a little closer. Just a little closer.
Okay.
Hey,
I do want you to know that we're very grateful to the World Trade Center Institute.
now talk into the mic, not to the side of it. Not closer.
One is television and one
Now you
is
get it.
indoors.
That's better.
Okay, great. I should also like to draw your attention to the next guest who is on our schedule, Ambassador Han Zhu, who is the ambassador from the People's Republic of China to the United States, and he will be our guest at Stouffer's Harbor Place Hotel on March 31st. From time to time, with respect, I'm thinking particularly to tonight, and with more luck than we deserve to have, a guest of the Council makes his appearance at the very moment when concern about the affairs of his country and its relationship to the United States is at an historic peak. Such is the situation with our guest tonight, and certainly we shall listen to his remarks with intense interest. Roberto Martinez Ordonez, Ambassador of the Republic of Honduras to our country, will address us on the foreign and economic affairs of Honduras. Ambassador Martinez was born and raised in Honduras, but he received his college education in our country at Bethany College, Mississippi Southern College, and at the University of Alabama, from which he was graduated in 1946 with a degree in civil engineering. He has a long record of service to his nation. As an engineer, he worked in the mining industry for over a decade. He has served his nation as Minister of Communications and Public Works, as President of the National Elections Council, and as Congressman of the National Congress. Diplomatically, he has been permanent representative to the United Nations, Ambassador to Nicaragua in 1982, Ambassador to the Organization of American States from 1983 to 1985, and now, of course, he is serving as ambassador from his country to ours. He has participated actively in the partisan political affairs of his country, as well as in a great many of its civic associations. Will you join me then in welcoming to the Baltimore Council Ambassador Roberto Martinez Ordonez.
Good evening, lovely ladies, gentlemen. I am very grateful to the Baltimore Council of Foreign Affairs and to the World Trade Center for this opportunity. And if there was ever a city to whose citizens I love bringing a message, it's to the citizens of Baltimore. I'll tell you why. This century was just turning to be when a young boy from Honduras arrived in these shores, grew up among you, eventually as a cadet, went to school that was placed in College Park, that in those days was called Maryland Agricultural College, but that was given directly officers to the American Army, where he eventually graduated in 1912, returned to our country to learn Spanish again. And all through his life, whenever he heard his wife, who happens to be my mother, play Maryland, my Maryland, on the piano. His eyes were full of tears. He loved this country, he loved this state, and he loved Baltimore, where the girl that he never married lived till her old age. I know that even a few years ago, Central America to you was some misty picture beyond the ocean. And Honduras might not even have existed to your mind. Today, the region where I was born occupies a tremendous space in your papers. In full honesty, I have to tell you, I wish it wasn't so. That would mean that we were in peace, trying to work to create a better life for our people and for those that will come behind us. But it has not happened so. And yet, no matter how prominent Central America has become in the public media, there is no question that it is still foreign and unknown to the American mind. To begin with, let me give you something like a telegram that might be the center, in a way, of what I talk with you tonight. Central America is 5 countries. It's not 6. Panama is not Central America. It's Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, Nicaragua, and Costa Rica. And we don't accept that there is any other one that is Central America. Why does this happen? Because culturally, historically, we are one. It is one nation where, sadly enough, the ideas of succession succeeded. And we have 5 governments in one nation. And that is felt so by the people from one extreme of the area to the other. That is why, no matter how hard it might be to understand for people, it is not possible for part of Central America to walk one way and part of it to walk another. There is only one road. We have to share it. The road through history, we have walked always together. And no matter what, before the end of the century, that definition of the destiny of Central America, that is the root of the struggle that there occurs today, shall be. And Central America will still be one, walking one road. What road that will be, I can only say, your crystal ball is as good as mine. We are committed to the idea of trying to achieve a full democratic life in our land. Others believe that social justice might still be lacking and want to find some more through other means, even if it goes into political spheres and schemes that are foreign to the mind of our people, and yet not foreign to theirs. Sometimes their intentions are not wrong, yet their actions seem to lead to changing a black whip that existed in the back of our people for a century or so into a red whip, which would hurt as much. To me, the answer would be reaching a place where whips are not necessary. and are not used. Anyway, in a way, a country, a nation, like a person, is a living monument of its culture, of its history. And that is why it's good to bring to your eyes the idea of how Central America came to be. Long before the Spaniards set a foot there, it was the land of the Maya. There was no absence of brains in the inhabitants there. They were far more advanced than some of the conquerors in the sense of their brain development, of their knowledge. But sadly enough for them, they had not discovered gunpowder and they didn't have any horses. So they lost the war. And the country became a Spanish colony. But when I say the country, I'm not talking about Honduras. I'm talking about Central America. It went through that era of Spanish dominion into independence in 1821 and was born as a free nation, as one. It was not 5 countries. It was one. It formed a federation. Eventually, foreign interests, lack of communication, many other factors destroyed that. And yet, in the soul of the people, it remained one. And last time they were asked what they wanted in that aspect, which was precisely when we were 1 century old as a free country, in a massive vote of over 70%, they expressed the opinion that they still wanted to be one. Armies acted, and the political effort was stopped. Yet, when you look at the flags of Central America, and this should convey a picture to you, you look at the flag of my country, it has 5 stars in the center. They are Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, Nicaragua, and Costa Rica. And you look at the Salvadorian flag and it has a phrase, God, Union, Liberty. And that is the flag of the Federation. And you look at the Nicaraguan flag and it has 5 volcanoes. There is no intention when I mention that and the fact that volcanoes might be destructive. But they mean the same. And the 5 stripes in the Costa Rican flag mean the same. That is why I tell you, Panama is not Central America. Anyway, in our road through history, the only abundance we have had is need. And the gravitation of that in the soul of our people who were denied economic justice, who were victims of powerful structures within governments, created a tremendous unrest in certain countries. Mine was not one of them, but in my nation it was happening. And that led the people to want to go into a more definite change and fed the seeds of revolution. It's understandable how revolution came to be. And you ask, why is it that in Costa Rica and in Honduras, nothing like that has happened? And the answer is simple. Our poverty was better distributed. Anyway, no matter if we are not in an armed struggle within our country, we're still in a totally communicated vessel that is Central America, and what goes on in the countries alongside our borders affect our very life. The people from El Salvador running away from violence crossed our borders. And the people of Nicaragua running away from violence crossed our borders. At this moment, we are sharing our hunger with over 200,000 people who have come just from Nicaragua. It's 5% of our population. And there are no countries helping us in that. Why, you might ask, you haven't closed your borders? Because they are us. We are one. You don't close the doors to your brothers. Of course, they represent different political signs. Yet, they are still our own. And even today, when the newspaper carries stories of even armed problems supposedly to occur between our countries, would you be surprised if I tell you that 70% of the electricity consumed in Nicaragua is produced in Honduras, and that Nicaragua is not paying for that because they don't have what to pay with, and we haven't cut off the switch? You see, what unites Central Americans is much more than what puts them apart. Now, I know that my country has created in the last times a very special security relation with your own. It doesn't mean that we want Americans to come and die in our soil. It only means that we feel that since one of the countries within our midst has reached understanding with forces that are so great that we could never face by ourselves, we needed an ally who could share with us the burden of preventing that those problems that came across our borders would create in our midst another enclave of forces that were foreign to our people's will, to our people's expressed political desire, and to our own convictions. And if you ask me about a sign that was supposedly at the door, sadly enough, I did not see it. I arrived here before they did. That said, Americans should be out of Honduras. I could tell you, I share that. But please, do not have them out of there before the Cubans and the Russians and the Germans leave the country alongside us. Because that would be betraying the ideas expressed by a Thomas Jefferson, by a John F. Kennedy, and by a Ronald Reagan. You see, we are a friend of this country. We are not a friend of any of its political factions. We make no difference among them. When it comes to what the roads they have walked through history, they are the same. The thing is that within your midst, Central America has become something like a tool in the political game of a presidential succession. And to some people, we might even have become expendable. I assure you we are not expendable. But somebody asked me today, what about the soldiers that came to Honduras? And your own government had told you they were going to a region far away from a region of conflict. Your own government had told you they would not be taken to a place where they could risk going into combat. Your own government had told you they'd be there for exercises for a few days. So when you come and ask me that, what does it show? Your lack of belief in your own self? Because what you were told is exactly the truth. It was a gesture that told Central American democracies, you are not alone. There are people in the world who share your values and worry about your future together with you. And that to me is welcome. And it was telling others, no matter if you have created an army tenfold in size the army of your neighbor, should you have that army act against them, you might not find only them. And although it was only a might, it conveyed enough of a message as to provoke a withdrawal. Thanks God that it saved lives, Nicaraguan lives and Honduran lives. Because the same way that we don't want our children to shed their blood, we don't want to have blood in their hands. I know that I could keep on talking about this for hours. But since I know that probably it would be more meaningful to you if I answer your questions directly, I invite your questions, no matter how challenging. I will try to answer. Thank you very much.
Ambassador, we thank you very much. The ambassador has agreed to answer questions until 10 minutes after 7. Yes, sir.
Accounting for the countries of Central America, where does Belize stand? You didn't mention that. Sure, part of Guatemala?
The gentleman was asking me about Belize. Well, yes, sir. If you go into what international law might have said, it is part of Guatemala. But it's the same question that what happened in other lands. Were you to apply that in the United States, you would say this is the land of the Indians. The thing comes to this. Belize is not culturally part of Central America. Belize doesn't speak our language. It speaks English. It speaks yours. Belize is more tied in its culture to the Caribbean islands that were British. Hence, although geographically placed in our midst, and although we have the best of relations with Belize, and no question, it was Honduras who proposed in the Organization of American States to scratch out Article 8 that prevented them from being there. But at the same time, I assure you that they are not part of that Central America I was talking about. That is the Central America that exists in the soul of our people.
Another question? Yes, sir. Just look back, please, so we can ask the question.
I wonder if you could comment, Mr. Ambassador, how much influence does Honduras have in Nicaragua?
The gentleman asked me how much influence Honduras has in Nicaragua. And it's a hard question to answer, and to answer properly. What is Nicaragua? A territory? Its people? The people of Nicaragua are deeply divided. I mentioned that 5% of our population at this moment is people who cross the border, to my interpretation, voting with their feet. Now, no question that those people have gratitude for Honduras. No question that those people who tend to follow a leadership of, in a way, of the ideas put forward by the Honduran government. But it goes deeper than that. You know, my last name, Ordonez, has deep roots in Nicaragua. It comes from León in Nicaragua. It is the name of the man who over there had the first revolutionary movement in the days of independence. We are so tied together that it's hard to put us apart. Rubén Darío, the most excelled figure in Nicaraguan literature, happened to have a Honduran mother. In El Salvador, there are two departments, two counties, as you might say, that have been named after people. They are not named after Salvadorians, they are both named after Hondurans. I repeat to you, sir, we are one. How much influence we have in Nicaragua depends on whether the Nicaragua is a Sandinista or is not.
Yes, sir.
Sir, I'd like to know, why is it necessary so frequently for the United States to convince Honduras that it is in danger from Nicaraguan incursion?
The question is, why does the United States have to convince Honduras that it is in danger from Nicaragua?
No, it's not that. The question is, why does the United States have to convince Honduras that in definite moments it is under the scope of a Nicaraguan action? That's basically behind the question. And I would have to ask the gentleman, why is it that your press has so deeply convinced you that to us, our own life, our own risk, have to be brought to our eyes by a foreign power? Let me be emphatic, sir. We are a friend of this country. We are not its tool. We share with the United States security concerns for different reasons. You, because the region is within your sphere of influence. We, because we are there. It is our destiny. It is our lives. It is that is being at risk. It doesn't mean that we share every value. We couldn't. How could we if this country is one of the countries that has achieved the greater wealth, has achieved the level of development it has, while we face the lower stage of development and the only abundance we have, as I mentioned before, is need. So in economic matters, we are millions of miles apart. And yet, we share, in a way, American dreams of people's security, of governments constructed on a people free expression of their will in ballots, not in bullets. And hence, it is not the United States that bring to us, like it has been insinuated in some of the press of this country, that something is happening in our country. It is us who many times have come to you and told you, we need your help. If you are our friend, give us a hand. But it's not a hand to solve our problems. It's a hand to permit us solving our own problems.
Ambassador, in light of what you're saying, that the 5 countries are very close together, assuming that in the near future peace is brought about, is there any possibility that the 5 countries could become something like the United States of Central America?
As I mentioned, sir, the question falls very close to my heart. I would say, sir, that even now, with all our differences, in many aspects, we are one. You know that we have a Central American Integration Bank that is very active. Do you know that in economic matters, in foreign fora, we speak with a single voice, no matter the minister of what country that is? It is in the political scope where the difference stands. Sometimes going so far as to making men die for them. But definitely, I would say that I don't know if through a structure of a federation like yours, but through some means, yes. I'd say before the end of the century, Central America will be walking a single road. I had even said that before. And I would hope, sir, it is a political union.
Mr. Sherman, I think you were last. Please.
Mr. Ambassador, recently in the Sun paper, there was an article in which the writer suggested or alleged that senior Honduran military officers were deeply involved in the drug traffic, and that this country had overlooked it and accepted it, was well aware of it, in order to maintain the relationship with Honduras. Would you comment, please?
It's very hard to comment on that, sir. I would say yes. I'm conscious of the fact that some affirmations of the type you make have been made. Our own government presented to the newspaper, to the New York Times to be exact, a petition to present names or proof. There has been no answer. We do not know of any instance of the type. Furthermore, there is an agreement between my country and the United States for the DEA to act within our country in cooperation with our own authorities. There is no question that we are not a producer of drugs. Sadly enough, we are placed in between the greatest producer and the greatest consumer, which is you. And we have a country where there are over 100 airstrips in the country, natural airstrips, that are beyond government control. I will not tell you, sir, that drugs have not traveled through Honduras. I can tell you that we don't consume drugs. We don't buy them. We don't sell them. But it could have happened. The thing is that those people who have the knowledge of such a crime against humanity as drug dealing is, should have the courage to present forward names and data that they have, so that we would have the opportunity of applying laws and acting with the force that the problem requires.
Senator Welcome.
Mr. Ambassador, are we there in Honduras because we were invited to come and help your country?
Ma'am, you are asking me if you're there because you were invited to come. I imagine you refer to the last few months. Because there are two ways in which the United States is there. Number one, there is a treaty between my country and the United States for military cooperation that has existed since 1954. And that is the one that has led to exercises to train our troops and yours in our land. You must realize those exercises were meaningful to us. We have an army that hardly reaches 20,000 men. And we have a neighbor with less inhabitants than we have that has an army that reaches 150,000. So we have to substitute number by training and sophistication of armament. Because if we didn't do so, we would have to use all our budget for defense instead of having health programs, education, and all the rest. And that would provoke probably that Honduras would be in the same case their neighbors are, of having an armed revolution within its borders. So in that sense, you have been there for a long time, and as I tell you, in exercises that occur once and again. You have been a tremendous assistance to our country, although, again, I don't want the picture distorted. Most of the assistance we receive from you is economic, not military. But if you're talking about the last instance, yes, it was a prevention. We asked the United States to give us all the assistance they could in a moment when our own country, our own land, was being penetrated by foreign forces from another country. The petition of Honduras was presented in Tegucigalpa, not in Washington, to your representative there. I did not personally take part in those discussions. I cannot tell you whose idea each one of the details that is there was. But I can assure you one thing. The request basically was made in general terms. Some gesture of solidarity, number one, that would convey a message to forces that were violating our territory in violation of Article 51 of the Charter of the United Nations. And on the other hand, the assistance that circumstances might make necessary. What do we mean by that? We mean the very things that our own armed forces would lack to take an effective police action and clean up our territory of foreign forces that had penetrated there. So there is no question, the request for assistance came from Honduras. Now, the definition of what assistance was to be made came from discussions. In those discussions, I was not a party. So the birth of the idea, I cannot tell you where it was. But none of the actions taken, to me, is ungrantable.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Ambassador, I'd like to know why your country provides safe havens for the Contras, since the only thing they seem to be doing is of the people that you profess such a brotherhood for.
Well, sir, I don't know the intention of your last phrase, but I'll try to ignore it. The thing is this, sir. There is no question that people in that country, in Nicaragua, who at a time owned property and left the country, were deprived of their property by law. If they were away from the country for 3 months, they didn't own anything anymore. It all became the government property. At the same time, there is no question that many Nicaraguans were being put to prison without what you call due process of law. In other words, they were judged by tribunals, what they call revolutionary tribunals, that were people from the Sandinista party that sat in a room and decided that person should go to prison, and they could condemn a person to 30 years in jail. There is no question either that in Nicaragua, the people who were producing grains, for instance, had to sell it to the government at the price they marked. And it was only the government, the one that could supply the people, and they were supplying precisely those that had cards of inscription in the Sandinista groups. So many of these people began to run away from Nicaragua. Your own country, when the Sandinista government took over Nicaragua, after destroying a black dictator, a horrible dictator they had in Somoza, gave them the biggest level of assistance ever. In the first year, the Carter administration gave Nicaragua $80 million in economic assistance. And yet, they were being insulted. These people were Nicaraguans, the ones that were moving out of Nicaragua. And many of them felt strongly against the authorities that were in their country. It was not Honduras that gave them money for that struggle. It was your country. It was your president. It was your Congress. Where else could they operate from? From the sea? From the air? Where did the Sandinistas operate from against Somoza? Do you know that the Sandinista front was formed in Honduras? Have you ever looked at a map and seen our border? 700 kilometers of empty land. There is no question either that many Hondurans, some of them in places of authority, were very sympathetic to the people who were fighting the Sandinistas, especially because the Sandinistas were at the same time introducing, training, and introducing armed people into our country that did not succeed simply because our campesinos were not exactly friendly to them. So there is no question that that happened. Many Hondurans, some of them in places of authority, did assist those people. But basically, the Honduran government never had a commitment of assistance to the country. No question the territory has been used. But when you say you permit it, I would tell you, who should patrol that border? Should we spend what little we have patrolling that border to protect the government, like the Sandinista government? Why don't they spend the money and send the patrols to cover their border so that they are not penetrated? Perhaps you should ask them.
I wondered maybe if in a similar light you could contrast the factors that differentiate Costa Rica's attitude versus that of Honduras to what you have indicated is the threat.
I don't know, sir, if there is that much of a difference. To begin with, the Contras, as they are called in this country, and that is an echo of how the Sandinistas define them, counter-revolutionary, which they are not necessarily. Not all of them, anyway. These people operated from Costa Rica. And Nicaragua has even accused Costa Rica many times of that. If you are talking about President Arias' initiative, please remember that the original initiative of President Arias was not the one that was approved in Guatemala. And that most of the additions in Guatemala were Honduran proposals. I would invite you, sir, to read the last meeting of the organization, the minutes of the last meeting of the Organization of American States, where the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Honduras, Carlos Lopez Contreras, made a serious proposal to establish a demilitarized zone between Nicaragua and Honduras, and between El Salvador and Honduras, where the struggles are, to be patrolled by international forces to prevent the use of territory for invasion. At the same time, he even proposed or expressed the willingness of Honduras to establish a program for the total withdrawal of any American military presence in Honduras, provided Nicaragua agreed to establish the same type of program to withdraw Soviets, Cubans, East Germans, and the rest of the people from the Soviet bloc. The first answer from President Ortega was that he considered it a positive step, and yet no further contacts were made after that. even today, in Guatemala, there is a minister meeting. The foreign ministers of Central America are meeting there. And this proposal is being reiterated by my country. Let's hope Nicaragua said it.
In the rear, please.
Mr. Ambassador, implicit in your comments, make it the belief that the Nicaragua junta, left to their own devices, would try to expand what they call the Sandinista revolution beyond the border. If that is your belief, do you attribute this to historical or ideological reasons or foreign influences in the Nicaragua junta?
I think I can repeat it. I think I heard it. He was telling me, he said that implicit in my remarks, and I wish you can tell me if I interpret you right, is the fact that I believe that the existence of the government of Nicaragua creates a risk of the ideology that I see in that government being projected to the rest of the Central Americans. And he asked me whether that came from my own convictions or it came from some other type of teaching or something like that. Is that correct? In general.
That is historically based.
Oh, whether it's historically based?
Historically based or ideological or a foreign.
Ideological or foreign. Or if you're talking whether it would be not Nicaraguan but from another foreign power. Sir, let me tell you what qualifications I have to answer your question. In the beautiful sketch about me that your vice president presented, there are a few things that have been forgotten. When there were dictatorships in my country, I was in prison. And I was in prison for fighting dictatorship precisely. Together with some of very prominent Americans, ever since 1959, I was elected one of the directors of the Inter-American Association for Democracy and Freedom. And when I tell you that occurred in 1959, although today, whatever hair I have left is gray, at that time, I was a very young man, and it was quite a distinction to be appointed there or to be elected there, together with a man like Rómulo Betancourt of Venezuela, like Eduardo Santos of Colombia, like Pepe Figueres of Costa Rica, and I could keep on the list. And like your Norman Thomas, and like your Francis R. Grant, and so forth. That, in a way, should give me a right to tell you what I think. You see, I cannot be anti-communist. I am pro-democratic. And is where the aspirations of a group tend to destroy the right of the people to be the architects of their own destiny, where I get stirred. Not because of their desire of social justice when it exists, because that desire I share. The thing is that when the Sandinista junta was formed, all of us Central Americans backed it. We didn't like what Somoza meant, what he represented. But then things began to change. The people who were most representative of democratic forces within that junta were ousted from the junta. And only those that had kept their contacts basically with Cuba more than with Soviet Union. Those that had had their political formation there, those that were declared Marxist-Leninists, were the ones to remain. And they were declaring, we have succeeded in Nicaragua. I'm almost repeating words, for instance, of Thomas Borges, the actual Minister of the Interior. We have succeeded in Nicaragua. El Salvador will be next, and then Honduras and Guatemala and Costa Rica, because we have to have one road. You see, that last phrase I share with him. they have once and again accepted that they have fed the idea of armed revolutionary movements to change the democratic structures in my own country. They have even brought terrorism to Costa Rica. They have been, no question, assisting the Nicaraguan Farabundo Martí group, whose headquarters are in Managua, whose radio is operated from Managua. If that doesn't show their idea of projection, I don't know what could. And then I ask myself, does it matter if it comes from their history, from their own cultural formation, or for they obeying foreign orders? Does it matter in the fact? What the fact is that they are trying to project that. And what we are trying is to say, look, let's find a way of accommodation where you go just so far, but remain within the structure of democratic values that has been the permanent aspiration of our people and has been denied by so many dictators we have had to fight in the past.
Mr. Ambassador, to return to your question about the analogy between Costa Rica and Honduras, hasn't Costa Rica expelled the Contras since its Honduras coup? And what exactly has Honduras done to be in compliance with its Honduras coup?
Ma'am, Costa Rica did not expel the Contras. President Arias asked some of the directors of the Contras to either leave Costa Rica or not act, not in the struggle, not act in the armed struggle, precisely at the moment when he's being handed the Nobel Prize for a proposal, peace. Yet, Costa Rica is also the place where several hundred, I won't say several, I said close to 200,000 Nicaraguans have gone to the same way as in my country. And they have not gone there because they are friends of the Sandinista government. So don't tell me that Costa Rica doesn't have any Contras, as you call it. But wait, I will go farther. You said something about compliance with the peace accord. And I know that the press in a way projects that Nicaragua has done so many things and the rest have done so little. Isn't it because Nicaragua had more to do? For instance, why should Costa Rica or Honduras, and although Honduras has even done it in spite of the fact that it only put one man in liberty for that, give an amnesty? They don't have political prisoners. And yet, Nicaragua has said we are giving an amnesty, and they have not. They have pardoned a number of people because amnesty comes from the same root that amnesia. It means forgetting. It means forgiving. And there are still 9,000 people in prison in Nicaragua for political reasons. Let's go from there. Why should we have to act to get a freedom of the press? The press in our country is totally free. I challenge you to prove that yours is more free than ours. The critics of the government and the critics of the armed forces are daily matter in our press. There is no previous censorship. Nicaragua, yes, has permitted the publication of one newspaper, La Prensa. But Nicaragua had expropriated all the radio stations. They are still part of the government. Does freedom of the press means letting one newspaper publish? Okay. So they had a lot of work to do there too. And let's keep on. We have no interior armed struggle. So we don't have to work for a ceasefire. Nicaragua has to. And the thing is this, there are three basic words in the Guatemala Code. One of them is simultaneity. It means actions to be taken at the same time, to be justified. That's exactly what the word means. It doesn't mean, as some people have interpreted here, the actions they will take when the others act. Number two, it has another key word, that is democracy. We don't have to look for it. We have to consolidate it. They have a long way to walk because they have to search for it. Some men saying that we are not in compliance is a way. Furthermore, you were talking about the contrast. I know they have operated many times from Honduras. I know that they have had places where they have stocked things, and even today, there are people who have been hurt in battle who are being cured in Honduras. What should we do? Close our border and turn them back so that they finish killing them? We have received them. And we have declared so publicly. But the very thing is this. In the last meeting in Costa Rica of the Central American presidents, this verification commission that was originally created was given, what should I say, a very low note by the presidents. They dissolved it. They all agreed to that. And Ortega had to accept that, because there had been too much partiality in some of their appreciation. And they created one for that verification, integrated by the very ministers of foreign affairs of the Central American countries. When that happened, Honduras declared, through its highest representative, the president of the country, that our country was open to inspection by that group, not by others. So, if Nicaragua, at this moment, believed that there was a contra camp, and I'll go into that because I know that the papers have been going into that, within Honduras, and that's why they had to send troops there. At least that's more or less what has transpired. One must ask oneself, why didn't the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Nicaragua request that this group go and visit that area to verify, instead of violating the territory of a country? And then there is one big contradiction that even your newspapers have carried. They said that Nicaragua took the command post that was in a place that they even identify by name within Nicaragua territory, where Colonel Bermudez, head of the Contra-Armed Forces, was acting, but that he had escaped into Honduras. That was said by Nicaragua. Wasn't it the affirmation before that the Contra Command was in Honduras? Please.
There's been a lot of talk about the 3,000 men that we have sent to Honduras. I have wondered, I know that they're going to be returned to the United States intact, we hope. I understand that in addition to the 3 men, and there's been very little talk about the enormous amount of arms and supplies and helicopters and other arms that accompany these men. When our men come out, what becomes of all these supplies?
Sir, it has been declared publicly, both by your country and by mine, they will return with their supplies. The Armed Forces Committee in your Congress requested that, made the same question. The answer was precisely what I'm giving you, and they definitely have a right to go and check it.
Mr.
Mr. Ambassador, I wish you would bring Cuba into the picture and help me in my clarification. I look at Cuba probably as a conduit over there for Russian goods to war material and stuff to the Central America and other places. And where is, I can't think of his name, the head of Cuba. Castro. So where is he headed himself? Is he attempting to put together a series of countries and he's the big wheel? And then he can go on the world scene and start throwing some muscle around?
Sir, well, your question has hardly anything to do with what I was talking about, but...
Well, you're from that area?
No, yeah, no, not from that area, sir. I come from Central America, not from Cuba.
I rely on your intelligence.
But please, I'll try to point out just a few factors. Mr. Castro has declared that he is non-aligned. He has been president of the non-aligned countries. Is he aligned to the Soviet Union? Mr. Castro has, in many instances, assisted revolutionary groups within Latin America. Mr. Castro himself is a very, very effective political figure. No question in that. And he projects to his people a very specific, likable image. That is his ability. As I believe and understand, Mr. Castro had advised the Sandinistas at first not to walk the same road that he had walked, and to play it a little bit more to get the assistance from the democratic governments in Europe, for instance, instead of taking the other road. That's what I have been knowing, more or less, for a long time. That was not abided for. In Nicaragua, there was a copy of the Cuban regime to the limit that even the armed forces head is the brother of the president, the same way as it is in Cuba. Anyway, let me tell you, not everything that Cuba has done in Nicaragua is negative. They have given very effective assistance to Nicaragua in the field of public health, for instance, where they went so far as to permit that the social service of their medical students, once they finished their and were able to obtain their degree, could be carried out in Nicaragua instead of being carried out in Cuba. There has been many things like that I would never call negative. His assistance in education, sadly enough, though, tied to a washing of brains toward the communist Marxist side. But the question of what Mr. Castro wants to do, honestly, I don't dare to answer. Mr. Castro himself has answered that many times. The big question is whether you believe him or not.
We only have time for a couple more questions. Mr. Lerner, Mr. Drayton, and then Mr. Stern.
Mr. Ambassador, could you tell us about economic development policies in Honduras and what has been the progress over the past few years in raising the standard of living of the Honduran people?
Sir, let me begin by telling you there is not a single developing country within the whole continent that can claim that the standard of living of their people has grown in the past few years. There is a tremendous effect coming from the petroleum crisis, from the increase of manufactured goods, and the lowering of the raw materials that most of those countries produce in the international market. Efforts, yes, they have been made. But I would not claim that we are better off today than we were 10 years ago, especially due to the fact that although we have interior peace, the area has not. And capital, in a way, has been extremely cautious about investment. Yet, we have gone into the exportation of non-traditional goods to the limit that within Central America, for a few years, we were the only country showing the positive growth. Positive relatively, because if you compare it to the growth of population, it was not so much. And yet, last year, it was positive growth even compared to that. But it was not enough. We have been returned to the standards of about 14 years ago, to about 1970. The rest of the area has gone back to 1960 or even beyond that. The policy of the country is open. We have taken both financial and economic measures to make it so. We have free ports for production. It is possible to have maquila in our country, that is the manufacturing there and re-exportation, to make use of the free ports and of labor that might be achieved at a lower price but with the proper training. We have increased with assistance of several countries, specifically great assistance from Taiwan, great assistance from Japan, great assistance from your country, and quite a bit from some of the European spheres, the introduction of new manufacturing processes and things like that, but to very small scale industry. Tourism, that could be a fountain for us, that would be very meaningful. We have in the Bay Islands, right off our Atlantic coast, the second biggest coral reefs in the world and the most beautiful. And that is not a tourist talk. It happens to be so really, because it even has, at places, it has projections, for instance, of black coral that is not found elsewhere. It's very beautiful. But you must realize, since you are one of the great fountains of tourism, that at this moment when somebody comes to you and tell you, "Why wouldn't you like to go to Central America?" You prefer not. So that is there as a potential, no question. Sir, one thing that is good about the crisis that Central America has lived, and I hope I can live in a way in that optimist note without refusing to answer questions to whatever, is that we have come to be in the map. Once the thing is over, once security returns to the area, we might find joyful and willing partners in this country and others to our own enterprises that might help us pull our people out of the hole they have been in for 100 years. I don't know, sir. It's up to you. I told you that.
The ambassador is gracious enough to answer Mr. Drayton first, then Mr. Stern. That'll be it.
The last question that was asked was basically mine. Thank you.
Mr. Stern.
Since the signing,
Thank you.
signing of the Dose Accord, Congress has cut off aid to the Contras, and the Contras have suffered a very serious military defeat in recent weeks in northern Nicaragua. My question is whether you think the Contras are negotiating from strength or from weakness in their negotiations with the Sandinista regime.
The reason for that strike, sir, is obvious, was precisely to make him negotiate from weakness. In any case, the point is not so much that. The point is the nature of the talks. They are being carried out. Both sides are optimistic. We can pray to God that they succeed. But the fact that aid was cut off, let me tell you, we wouldn't have been in favor of a tremendous amount of aid being granted for military purposes, while there was a chance in conversations and so forth. So, but our president said very clearly one thing to your president and to your Congress. Although, and this is contradictory to what the impression on some quarters is, although at this moment we would not believe that military assistance is the answer to the problem of Nicaragua, we would not like to see that door, that possibility closed, definitely. Because while there is no military aid going, but nobody has said it won't go, and it still might go, that might move them closer to the negotiating table than saying we will not give, again, military assistance.
Thank you for enduring our especially long question and answer period. I apologize to many of you who had your hands up from almost the beginning of the program, and Mr. Rayfield and others who had them up later. We apologize very much that we just don't have enough time. And Mr. Ambassador, you were good enough to be direct and full in your answers to us. We appreciate that, and you're coming forward.